Mark Thomas as well has 10 minutes for a rebuttal.
From my viewpoint, a lot of lies get told over time, and it takes significant effort to address each one. So I will have to admit, first off, that I won't be able to establish, to cover every one of these. So let's take a look at the biggest one, which is the start of the universe. Once again, this is, since we don't completely understand, and saying that simply a God did it is simply a God of the gaps type concept. Or argue, I don't understand something, therefore a God did it. Well, the truth is we do have excellent evidence going back to how the universe starts. It's called the inflation theory by Alan Guth, and it shows how the universe could have come into being. Now, I will freely admit it does not make rational sense. But it's important to note that quantum mechanics does not make rational sense. The concept basically is, I'll go over it quickly, is that you can have a fluctuation in the quantum indeterminacy, and out of this can grow positive energy and negative energy. The positive energy will eventually precipitate out and become the matter that we know around us. The negative energy is what we know as gravity. This sounds really strange and really flaky, but it's been shown through excellent empirical and theoretical evidence that this is true. So we don't have to resort to some God as the cause of it. We can resort to simply quantum indeterminacy. I made a big point out of Jesus being simply a fictional character. I think that if Jesus is claimed to be the Son of God, that showing that that is not true, that he was likely a fictional character created in the latter half of the first century, it makes strong questions about whether this God could actually have existed. It's interesting enough that we have no evidence outside the Bible that has shown that's because there is none. Nobody of the time wrote about Jesus existing. Nobody. The closest they have is Tacitus, a Roman historian who wrote around 116 A.D. That's how many years? 80 years after the supposed death of Jesus. We have Josephus, who wrote around the end of the century. First of all, the writings of Josephus are obviously a fiction that was inserted later on, probably by Eusebius around 324 A.D. So we have this man who supposedly walked around doing miracles. Nobody seems to have noted him. There were at least 30 people, 30 historians and other authors, who make no mention of him. It becomes rather obvious when you start looking at the external evidence that Jesus was simply a fictional character created to fulfill their longing for somebody to deliver them from the oppression of the Romans. Not every event has a cause. Not every event does. When you look into quantum mechanics, many events happen without a cause. The most obvious one is when a radioactive nucleus breaks down. That is without cause, and we can't predict it. The world around us is full of events at the quantum scale happening without cause. When we look at it at the Newtonian view, it does appear that every event does have a cause, but not at the quantum level. And the start of the universe happened at the quantum level. There is no law of cause and effect, as I've shown. That's a fallacy that's created by people trying to push the cosmological argument. Paul may have claimed that he saw Jesus, but Paul, once again, never actually even claimed that he met Jesus. Paul had visions. Paul was likely epileptic or had some sort of fits. And as we've known nowadays, that this causes religious feelings, very strong religious feelings. So Paul never met Jesus. The authors of the Gospels, once again, are completely unknown. We have no idea who they were. They simply wrote stories. Eventually, these names, Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were added around 324 for the Council of Nicaea to give a cohesion. At the time, they wanted one religion to control the whole area. We've heard that evolution isn't even a fact. It isn't even a theory. Well, in fact, it's both. The evidence for evolution is overwhelming. We have excellent evidence even among us. Most of us, it isn't too often nowadays. But when you get chills and you get little goosebumps, do you know what's going on? What's happening is there's little tiny muscles attached to every one of our hairs. And the muscles are trying to pull the hairs up to make them stand on end, to make us warmer. It doesn't do us much good because we don't have really fur. But for our ancestors, going back, say, 5 million years, when what became the line of humans, when our ancestors broke off from those, they had much furrier bodies. And this would actually keep them warmer. Some people can wiggle their ears. Completely useless for us. Not for our deep ancestors. Anybody who has, say, dogs or cats know that they can wiggle their ears around to better determine the source of the sound. So there are many other points in our bodies. Our bodies aren't perfectly designed. They work fairly well, but they're certainly not perfect. Those of us who have to wear glasses know that our eyes aren't perfectly designed either. So this whole concept of evolution being somehow false is, the idea is false. The evidence is overwhelming that it has occurred. We can go back in time through the fossil record. We can go back in time through a genealogy. We can show how we've descended from other species on this planet. We can show how we have the same basic genes as the other great apes. It's really interesting. We happen to have 23 sets of chromosomes, where the other great apes have 24. But you can show how one of our sets is formed by a combination of two sets of genes from the other great apes, with the telomeres at the center when they should be at the ends. So we can show genetically that we're descended from ancestors of the other great apes on this planet. The moral argument is very big. It was a very big bit for C.S. Lewis. He couldn't understand why we would treat each other, well. I think we treat each other well because that's how we are largely programmed by evolution. There's no God telling us to do it. We love and care for each other because that's who we are. Parents, in order to have successful offspring, have to love and care for their offspring. Parents love each other, and thus it help to ensure the survival of their offspring. Obviously, this is not 100%, but it works well enough to make us survive. For much of our history, we survived as small tribes living out in the jungle or in the savannah. In such an arena, the parents have to love their offspring in order to increase the odds for the offspring to survive. They have to cooperate among each other. So any individual that didn't love their offspring would be much less likely to have surviving offspring. Any individual that did not cooperate in the tribe would be much less likely to survive. So we love and we cooperate largely because of evolution. So I said that's obviously not perfect because we have many other competing factors as far as between tribes. But it's why we survive. It's why we love. Now, the God of the Bible certainly doesn't seem to love us. At many points, he kills off large numbers of people. In the story of Noah's flood, he kills off almost everybody. This is not a loving God. This is a God to be feared. I can't imagine why anybody would want to spend time with such a character. It reminds me, as noted by Christopher Hitchens, of living in North Korea, where everybody worships the Great Father who abjectly doesn't care for his beings. So we talked about the historical argument. As I pointed out, there is no evidence that Jesus ever existed. This is important because if Jesus is the Son of God and if Jesus didn't even exist, then it throws severe questions into the existence of God. We're debating tonight the Christian God. So if Jesus did not exist or there's no reliable evidence that he existed, it's a significant question. So I've covered all the pretty much the big points. Once again, most arguments are what are called the God of the gaps. I don't understand something, or I don't think other people understand it, therefore God exists. This has been done throughout history. We used to think that the earth was flat and that the sun went around it. Then finally Copernicus came in with the evidence and Galileo finally pushed the idea. Now it's relatively well accepted by most people that the sun does indeed have the earth circling it. So I will maintain that it sounds good, it's a great story, that there's a God and there's a Jesus that loves you, but there's no reliable evidence that either of these is true. Thank you.